Let's take a walk down the street to that old haunted house. This world is a strange one. There's really no telling when a house is haunted. In movies and TV shows, it's always that old abandoned place with strange graffiti all over it. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it might be a newly built home with very recent tragedies that caused its paranormal activity to spike. Other times, it's the recently remodeled place right next to yours, where, not too long ago, you heard those gunshots. You see, all it takes for a house to become haunted are traumatic events, and with people, this is far too common. We kill each other, torture each other. We want to see each other in pain. So thanks to the human species, I have 10 allegedly true stories of haunted houses to share with you tonight. Before we start though, I want to give another shout out to Scott G, who has consistently been donating to our website, and we appreciate every bit of it. I honestly can't wait to get those renovations done and see what kind of awesome community we can have on our website. So thank you, Scott, for bringing us closer to our goal. And also, don't forget to send us your Christmas horror stories because you know a Christmas special is coming up. Anyway, you're gonna need a cleansing after these stories. So let's get started. Number 1. I knew something wasn't right. Submitted by SLIEST. I used to live in poverty. I believe there was actually a ghost in my other house. That was the house my mother saw a demon, but that's her story. In this one, I was around 10 or 11. I'm 13 now and we've moved out. We've bought a much better place, a nice looking white house. But this older one, it had a weird layout. But it was nice. It had an attic, which is very important to this story. It must have been a Sunday or Saturday in that old house. I can't remember. I wanted to pamper myself, so I went to find this bucket we use for soaking our feet. I had to look in the attic for it. The thing about this attic is, I'm deathly afraid of it. I cried the last time I had to go up there for something. It just makes me feel weird every time I go up there. I used to run down the steps and slam the door behind me, and I would lock it back. I also find it weird that the lock was on the outside. It really makes you wonder what was up there originally. Anyway, I went upstairs and I snatched the bucket, and I dashed down the stairs like I always did. I felt as though it was too late when I slammed the door and locked it. I literally ran to my bathroom, and I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Then I suddenly saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I screamed and I spun around, and there was a black figure. It was so close, on instinct I reached out and I slapped it. My hand contacted something before I could really see. There wasn't anything there. But the scary part is, I know for a fact that I hit something. I could feel it. I brushed it off and I continued to fill up the bucket. I couldn't shake that feeling. There was something still there with me. Fast forward about 1 month later, my anxiety worsened, and I started showing signs of depression after I saw the first shadow. I just assumed it was the stress of school. One night, I walked into the kitchen. We have a stationary bike trainer in my home, and I was looking away from it. I saw something. It looked to be a black figure with a mask on. What I saw looked brown and almost bird-like. My head snapped towards it, and it was gone. But I knew I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I slowly kept walking towards the kitchen, and once I entered, I saw it again. This time, it was standing behind me. This time, my cat, who was sitting on the laundry basket, the laundry room is connected to the kitchen, hissed and ran behind the water heater. I turned around and nothing was there. Again, it was in the corner of my eye, and then it was gone. But I know for a fact that my cat had seen something. It was looking behind me and then hissed and ran. That alone gave me chills. Another weird thing happened. Every night I'd hear leaves crunching outside my window. I'd look out and there would be nothing there. And I know it's not an animal or something because we do not have anything but squirrels and chipmunks, and they wouldn't go anywhere near my window. My cat scares them because she likes to watch them from it. I also started hearing whispering. Randomly, my ears will get overwhelmingly filled with different voices of familiar and unfamiliar people saying my name. I honestly thought I was going crazy. I'm not surprised I can hear them though. I used to hear the soft whispering coming from my living room at the old place. I would go look and nothing would be there. I've always been able to hear these spirits, I guess. Fast forward again to around a month ago, from the present day. I got a girlfriend, we had hit it off pretty well. Life was going good. Then things just fell apart. Someone jumped in front of my mother's car, and she was never the same after that. And it worsened my already horrible anxiety. It feels like in this house, we constantly feel this oppression from nowhere. I can't help but feel that this is from the spirit, especially the fact that my depression has returned twofold. It all started after we moved into the place, and I saw that thing. It also probably attached itself to me, and that's why all these horrible things are going on, and they keep getting worse. I can only hope that life gets better, and I want to believe that everything's going wrong not because of the ghost, that it's just a coincidence. Even so, seeing this spirit, it doesn't really help these matters. Number 2. Post-Halloween Scare. Submitted by CHOTS. This happened mid-October in 2016, probably 2 weeks before Halloween. It was my third semester at the junior college, and I was taking my second night class, which was English. It was only the third time I was walking alone at night from the bus stop. My mom always tells me to be careful at night for fear of getting robbed, even though the town is so quiet late at night. So there's this abandoned house I pass by to and from the bus stop, and I've always wondered if ghosts live in it. Mainly because the door was always open day and night, and I would see or hear something inside of it. So when the parents couldn't pick me up one night, I went on over to that house. I've always wanted some excitement for Halloween. Once I was inside, I knew it was a big mistake. Inside, it was as if the AC was on high. The house was abandoned for a while, and there were no signs of people living there. And to make things even better, I saw that typical writing on it, "Get out," as if they wanted to scare somebody. It was spray painted on the wall. I wasn't really spooked yet until I heard the footsteps from upstairs. I kinda panicked and tripped over something. I was scared it was some lunatic coming down to kill their intruder, but what I saw wasn't normal. I stood there and watched as a lady who looked to be wearing a 30s style nightgown slowly faded into view, and I don't mean came around a corner, I mean she appeared. By this time I was beyond frozen stiff. The next thing I know, she pointed to me, then to the door, and I kid you not, she said in a very, very terrifying voice, "Get out!" I ran all the way home myself, and I didn't tell anyone about what happened. I don't think I could if I tried. It's safe to say that I got my post-Halloween scare that day, but to this day, I walk on the other side of the street away from that house. At night though, I'd see and hear the same things. Sometimes, if I'm unlucky, I might see the woman looking at me from the window, which always gives me chills. Recently though, I did find out that the previous owner of the house was a victim of demonic possession from a Ouija board game. They've passed on since, but apparently the spirit still haunts the place. Number 3. What was that? Submitted by Ross. Before I start, I need to give a little background to the story. My name is Dylan, and at the time of this story, I was about 13. This incident, though, will probably haunt me forever. There are 2 incidents of this. My family and I had just moved into a new house. My great-grandmother passed away only a week before. At the time, I was homeschooled because of something that happened at school, so I was usually home alone. The times I was alone, I would play on my sister's Wii. One day, I was there but not alone. My mother was upstairs feeding my baby sister, and my little brother was sleeping. The rest of my siblings were at school. On that day, I was watching YouTube when I heard a huge bang on the door. I opened it, but I saw nothing. I left the door open just in case something did happen. And around 10 to 15 minutes later, I had completely forgot about what hit the door. Then a ball came flying into the room. I ran upstairs and told my mom, and she didn't believe me. I almost expected her to say something like that. Skip ahead to a few months later. We were moving out of that house, and me, my mom, and my dad were in my parents' old bedroom. My baby sister at the time was in the living room, alone. A few minutes passed by, then me and my parents were alerted by a woman's voice saying, "Hi, baby." We all looked at each other, and we ran right out of the house and never went back in. To this day, I wonder if the voice may have been my great-grandmother. And perhaps the ball that flew into the room was from my baby brother, who passed away in the womb from a severe heart disease. Well, I hope to God it was them, because if not, then who was it? Number 4. The Old Haunted House. Submitted by Ashley. When I was about 4, my family and I had to move. My family consisted of my dad, my baby sister, and my mom. The 4 of us moved into a creepy old house with an ugly green door. When I walked in with my family, the atmosphere was very unsettling. When my dad went into the kitchen, he found a Ouija board on the floor. No joke. So when he saw it, he threw it out immediately. It gave us a bit of insight as to who lived here before. But after he threw it out, some scary stuff started to go down in the house. One day I was playing in my room, and I had this big play horse that had a big spring that when you played on it, the spring would bend back and forth. So as I was saying, the horse started to rock back and forth, yet I wasn't on it. I never even touched it. When I looked up, I saw that no one was around to have moved it. So I asked who's there, and I could faintly see a little pale-faced child, no more than 4 years old. She wasn't there, and then she was. Before there was no one on the horse, and the next time I blinked, she was there on it playing. It was crazy. She was on the horse giggling and laughing, and when I said who's there, she looked at me and smiled, and I did the same. I said, "Do you want to play?" And she said yes. I was very happy to have someone to play with. This little girl and I would play all day and night. I remember it very well. That night she told me her name was Emily. But on that very same night, we both heard footsteps coming up the stairs, and we were both terrified. I went to my mom quickly and asked if she heard them too, but she said she didn't. Then Emily disappeared when the footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. The next day I saw her again. We played and we had lots of fun together. I guess a part of the fun was the fact that my sister was only 1, and I really didn't have anyone to hang out with. A few hours later, 2 more people appeared. They were her brother Brian and her mom Tracy. Her mom said that they'd been looking all over for her, and Emily said, "Mommy, look, I made a friend." Her mother just sat down and let us all play together. A few more hours later, and it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. Things took a bit of a dark turn. I heard those footsteps again, and this time they sounded louder than the last. We all looked at each other in horror. There was something about these footsteps that resonated evil. Then I looked at my door, and it opened, and behind it there was this big black mass with glowing red eyes in the middle. I couldn't make it out very well, but something told me that this was their father. Everyone tried to run away. They were in a panic, but they couldn't, because the black mass had a hold of all of them. It wrapped around their feet, and I held on to Emily, trying to pull her free. Things got even darker. The black mass spoke to me in a very demonic voice. He told me, "They're mine." The black mass then wrapped itself around my waist, and I started to scream. I could feel a very sharp, stabbing cold sensation on my side, right above my hip. Emily screamed at her dad to put me down. He didn't, he just started to hold me tighter and tighter. That pain, it was one of the most painful things in my life. I started to scream even louder, and I was crying. Then Emily's mom put her foot down and told him to put me down now. She sounded so protective, so motherly. When she said that, the mass with its sharp fingers like needles were in my skin. It put me down, and it grabbed his wife by the neck. And a few seconds after, the woman went limp. At that moment, I closed my eyes and I prayed all the prayers that I knew. I prayed to Saint Michael, the Archangel. I prayed to God. After closing my eyes and praying for what felt like an eternity, I opened them, and they were all gone. No one was in the room with me. The black mass had disappeared, along with the woman, the boy, and Emily. I was so terrified that I ran to my mother. I tried to tell her about the people, about Emily, about everyone that I had been seeing. And of course, it was written off as imaginary friends, a little girl's imagination. I know this sounds bizarre, but this memory is very true, and it is still so vivid in my mind that it gives me chills just thinking about it. When all those spirits were gone, even the not-so-bad ones, the air just felt better in that place. But I was always nervous that they'd come back. I missed Emily, but I was worried that if she came back, so would the Black Mass. Number 5. Cursed Property. Submitted by Gabrielle. To be completely honest, I've always been a firm believer in the paranormal, and I've always been interested in it. I would watch ghost hunting shows and horror movies. Despite my parents' clear discomfort for my interests, I've always suspected something was going on in my house. And one day, I got confirmation. One day I was playing with 2 of the neighbor girls. In respect of their privacy, I will not say their actual names. The youngest was sitting on the wall near the gate, and I thought she looked adorable. I have a habit of taking pictures of things I found beautiful, so it took me 2 seconds to whip out my phone and take a picture of her. I didn't examine it until later that night. I was lying in bed when I saw it. There was an orb in the photo. For those of you who don't know what an orb is, it's a sphere of light that appears in the photo, which is presumed to be a soul of a deceased person. Many brush off orbs in photos as light from a shard of glass on the sidewalk or just a glare, but I knew that wasn't the case because it was dusk when I took the photo. It was nearly dark out. The orb was right next to her head. I couldn't help but get both excited and nervous. I got up from my bed and started taking pictures around my house with the flash on, hoping I wasn't some crazy weirdo. I looked through them all, and to my surprise, I saw another orb. This time it was larger, and the picture was taken down the passage to my room where it was dark. And of course, I decided to talk to the little girl's mother. Their house is on the same property as ours, so I wanted to know if I wasn't just imagining something. But I found out my suspicions were pretty accurate. Their mother told me stories of how the towel would shake violently when she was bathing, and that things would go missing and turn up in places that they'd never expect. I was pretty satisfied with my findings, but I was freaked out at the same time. My property was apparently cursed. How many people do you know who could say that? The next night, I was texting my boyfriend late at night with my bedroom light on. Eventually, I got really tired and I said goodnight to him. I put my phone on the charger and I reached for the light switch above me. I flipped it, plunging the room right into darkness. And that's when I heard it. It was the most blood-curdling scream, and it was coming from right next to me. Never have I jumped up so fast, and never has my body been covered in goose flesh so quickly. I switched the light on and my heart was pounding. I kept asking myself, what was that? Was I dreaming? When I calmed down, I felt ready to switch off the lights again. But the moment I did, the scream came again, booming through the house. I was shaking and in tears, and I switched on the light. I could tell by the scream that this ghost was a she, but I didn't care. I just wanted her to leave me the hell alone. At the very least, let me sleep. I have no idea how I slept that night, but eventually and painstakingly, I did. A few days later, I approached my friends about the ghost in my house. They were believers too, so we decided to set up a sleepover at my place to do some videotaping and EVPs, or voice recordings, to see if we could catch anything else. Unfortunately though, my friend Abby was the only one brave enough to actually show up. We decided to do it in my neighbor's house this time, because my parents would have killed me if they realized what I was doing. The mother, let's call her Jocelyn, had been really cool with it. Her kids were at their father's house that night, not to mention she wanted some solid evidence for herself, so she allowed it as long as she could stay. The night seemed to be a bust. We caught nothing on our recorders or cameras, not even an orb. But that soon changed. While Abby and I were trying to be ghost hunters, Jocelyn had been sending voice notes to her friends in the kitchen. In the middle of us trying to record, she called us into the kitchen with her. She looked really freaked out. We asked what was wrong, and she proceeded to explain that she was going over 3 voice notes she had sent to a guy, and he hadn't replied in 15 minutes. So out of boredom, she listened to her last 3 voice notes herself. She played them all for us. The first one was completely normal. She was talking normally and clearly. But then she played the second recording. It sounded like something out of a horror film. There was this otherworldly, malicious growl, like it was some demon right next to her. And then she played her third recording, and it was completely normal. No human could have made that noise. I knew nothing good would come of it if I didn't do something about it. So I took some olive oil and painted crosses on the doorposts of each door, and I prayed over it. But that night, I dreamt that one of my friends had been chased by a clown, and I tried to save her, but I fell into a body of water, and I drowned. Drowning is my worst fear, so I just had to tell Abby about it when I went to school on Monday. Abby looked at me wide-eyed and said, "Whoa, don't tell Cameron, because clowns are his worst fear." That was weird. I swear to God, I had no idea clowns were his worst fear. Cameron and I weren't close at all, so the news shocked me. Luckily though, the dream was probably a parting gift to whatever was in my house, because nothing else has happened. Not since I blessed the place. It's been 2 years later, and it's still really creepy. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I didn't do something about whatever that thing was. Let's hope I never find out, and that it never comes back. Number 6. What Comes with the House? Submitted by Hennessy, 17. This story takes place at my dad's old house in Arizona. Most of the experiences are his, and a few are mine. But this story starts when my dad first started renting the house. He had been living there a few weeks when he met his neighbors, and out of nowhere, they asked if he knew about the woman who had lived in the house before him. My dad said no, so his neighbor went on, telling him that there was an old woman who lived there for quite a while before she passed away in the master bedroom. He said it actually took about a week before her body was discovered. Now, my dad wasn't really a believer in the paranormal or ghosts or anything of the sort, so we thought nothing of it. He pretty much ignored the story for a while, not really sure what to think of its validity, considering the landlord never told him of such a story. So then the summer comes around, and I was to spend it at my dad's house. I had never been there before, and it was a nice little place. I was happy to have my own little bedroom to stay in. Visiting my dad those few weeks were the best weeks of that summer, but a few strange things happened. The first weird thing I noticed were the cats. There were always stray cats coming to the house, always hanging out in the front yard or on top of one of the cars. My favorite was the Siamese mother cat and her little kittens. I didn't really think it could have anything to do with something paranormal, but now that I look back, the sheer amount of cats that just came to the house was definitely strange. I mean, dozens upon dozens of them came to our place. This second thing happened when I was at the house one day alone. My dad, his girlfriend, and his roommate were all working that day. It wasn't the first day I was there alone, but it was definitely the scariest. It was the afternoon and I had to use the bathroom. I was finishing up and washing my hands when I suddenly heard a huge crash from the kitchen. I jumped, a little freaked out. It sounded like some glass was breaking all over the floor. I rationalized it must have been my dad's roommate. He must have been off work early, so I called out to him, "Dave?" Now, the bathroom I was using had 2 doors, one that went out to the kitchen and one that led into my dad's room. As I walked into the kitchen, I didn't see anything. Not a thing. I was really freaked out now because I knew I heard something break. I mean, it was right outside the bathroom door. I was sure of it. I searched every room, thinking someone maybe broke in. But when I walked down the hallway, I saw a shadowy figure dart into my father's room. I froze in my tracks. I was way too scared to enter and ran the other way. Then I called my dad about what happened, and I hid in a corner of the living room behind the couch until his roommate actually got home. Even still, I waited outside for my dad the next few hours until he came home from work. Honestly, I was that scared. I kept thinking how there was no way I imagined that. I heard something loud crash. I couldn't have imagined it. And that figure darting in the hallway, it was no shadow, it was right there in front of me. Luckily, my dad felt bad, and he said he believed me, The last week I was there, nothing else seemed to have happened, but I always felt on edge. I felt like I was being watched in that house. But the next few events happened to my dad. He said he was coming home from work one day with his girlfriend, and when they got inside, he went to the bathroom while she got started on dinner. He had the door to the kitchen closed, but he left one open that connected to his bedroom. He said that as he was washing his hands, he looked up, and indirectly across from him, he saw a figure in his room. The figure was standing by his bed, and it slowly walked around the bed, right past the bathroom door where he was standing. Scared out of his mind, he ran out the other door, telling his girlfriend to get the keys to the car, that they were leaving. In the car, he then told her what happened, and they did not return until almost 1 in the morning. The other stuff that happened to my dad affected his sleep. He told me there were times where he would have some of the worst nightmares, and he would wake up in a cold sweat. Some nights he felt like he was paralyzed and he couldn't move, yet he was still awake. He said he could open his eyes though, and when he did, he saw a woman standing at the end of his bed, staring down at him. He would try to call out and moan, but he could not get up. That is, until his girlfriend shook him awake. Now, he admits he wasn't sure if something was making him do this or not. But as soon as he moved out, the dreams never happened again. The sleep paralysis was gone. The last thing that ever happened to me happened again in the bathroom. I had gotten out of the shower and was standing in front of the mirror, wiping off the fog, when suddenly, I swear I saw a face behind me. It was a woman, an old woman, although I couldn't make out many details. I quickly whipped around, only to find nothing behind me. I was horrified, and from then on I took showers in the guest bathroom. I never told Dad that story. I was too afraid he wouldn't believe it. I guess I just thought we were never on the same page with this paranormal happening. It wasn't until years later that he told me the rest of his stories, because he believed I was too young and I would be too scared to know what happened at the time. And since then, he's moved out and has never had anything paranormal like that happen again. But one of the first weeks after he moved out, he got a call from an unknown number. He said it was from some people who had been looking into buying the house. He asked, "How did you get my number? I'm not the real estate agent in charge." But the man told him, "I found your number on the back of the card you left behind." My dad was very confused. There was no way they had gotten his phone number. He had finally gotten one and never left any card behind. He didn't know how his number had even gotten out, and why. The last thing he asked the man on the phone was, "Have you heard about the old woman who had lived there? Ever hear anything strange about the house?" The man answered, "No, I haven't." And my dad replied, "Oh, don't worry, you'll love the house and what comes with it." Number 7. Shadow Farmer. Submitted by SIDESHOW-CELLOPHANE. This story of mine may not be as creepy as other people's experiences, but it happened, and I would like to tell somebody about it. I lived on a farm for about 12 years of my life, and my entire family knew that it was haunted. It was nothing malicious or anything like that. There was an energy there. We heard voices sometimes inside of the house when we were alone, or we'd see dark flashes out of the corners of our eyes, not to mention some of the things that happened on the farm itself. We've moved out since then to a more modern house, but that still doesn't change the fact that I have seen and heard some weird things. The farm that my brother and I were raised on was built in the early 1900s. The house that we grew up in was just as old, and our landlord that owned the property never fixed or rebuilt anything so much as put band-aids on the old barns. You know, repaint a building here, replace some wood there, you get the picture. Nothing was ever truly fixed or replaced. So, all of that territory was almost 100 years old and falling apart. The layout of our backyard was like this. You come out of the back door and come to a fence with an opening to a very small bridge crossing over a creek. This was drinking water for the cows. Then you get to the barns. When you got past the barns for the cows, horses, and farm equipment, you got to the pastures where the cows and horses grazed. And then there was a fence, and past that a mountain that I used to hike up all the time. Roughly, the farm was 144 acres of land, and my brother and I felt blessed to be raised in a place where we had a mountain in our backyard. And across the street, and on either side of us, it was the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they were everywhere. From our place in the valley, the clouds and the night skies were beautiful too. It was all picture perfect. Well, seemingly. I used to walk into the pasture with my iPod in my pocket and earbuds in my ears, listening to music as I made my way to the mountain for some exercise, the one past the pasture. This particular incident didn't happen until after I was hiking back down, at maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon, broad daylight. I saw some thunderclouds forming in the sky, and I figured that I could stay for a minute or 2 to watch the clouds gather. I remember, although I had my earbuds in, I paused the music to listen for thunder, but there wasn't any. I stopped a ways from the fence, a bit into the pasture. No cows were present. They were all across the street in another grazing field. And that's when I saw it, as I gazed up into the sky at those clouds. Maybe 20 yards away from me and just out of the corner of my eye, I saw something black move. It looked like a man walking along the fence away from me, on my side of the fence, so we were both in the pasture. I turned to look in surprise, because I swore that I'd been the only one out there for seconds before. It had the thick build of a man, and the rounded shape at the top of his head suggested that he had no hair, and I could tell it was a man by the build of his body. I also knew that on the other side of the mountain there were hunters sometimes looking for deer or fox, but none of them had ever come into our farm. However, in retrospect, I realized that no human could have been pure black like that. It wasn't dark out, but I turned to look at him and he was a shadow. But one moment he was there, and the next it was gone. There was nothing. I stared and scanned the area over and over, figuring it must have been me being tired. I had just hiked up and down a mountain after all, and I turned back to the sky. But was that the end? No, I saw that shadow man again. This time, instead of walking along the fence, he was facing me. His legs were moving towards me, and I tried to keep my eyes on the clouds so I could keep this weird shadow man in my peripheral vision. I did not want to lose sight of him this time. It was so utterly bizarre to me, because at that point I was in middle school and had lived on the farm for over a freaking decade, and I'd never seen such a clear, physical entity such as this. I wanted to stay and see what would happen as he got closer to me. My morbid sense of curiosity compelled me to stay in one place and watch it out of the corner of my eye, until a figure began to run towards me. I saw legs lift quickly, arms pumping, head lowered, all in a matter of seconds. It's been many years, and I still remember how he veered off from simple walking to running right at me. And I still remember how, after just a split second doubting my sanity, I could hear the rapid fall of its feet. I heard it running towards me, what looked like the shadow of a fully grown man moving, and I was frozen in place. As soon as the fact that not only was I seeing it, but it was making a sound that I could hear, I turned and began to sprint towards my house like never before. At the time, I don't know why, but all that I could think of was getting to the bridge, the one with the creek running water. Right below it was between my house and the farm. I was a huge Tim Burton fan and remembered this from Sleepy Hollow, in what was probably my mind trying to convince me that I was going to be safe if I got to the running water. That old ghosts can't cross running water kind of thing. I remember trying to listen for its footsteps, but to be honest, I couldn't tell which was the figure running, and which was me or the pounding of my heart. I just remember watching out for cow patties and trying to listen, but even as I reached the bridge, I did not stop running. I still felt like I was being followed. I flung open the back door of my house and slammed it shut behind me, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief and locked it. I looked out of the windows and saw nothing. When I told my mom about the experience, she and I had a pretty long conversation that pretty much summed it up to, "We've all seen weird things around here, but it was never evil." Well, while I'm not sure whether the shadow person was evil or not, he was definitely running at me at full speed. If you think that shadow people, a legitimate form of spirits, are supposed to run away from you as soon as you see them, think again. Like people, everyone is different. Maybe I had just pissed this one off because I'd seen it. Maybe I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe it was evil and I escaped something that could have been deadly, especially with all the old farm equipment lying around with the thunderstorm building. All I really know is nothing like that ever happened again, and I hope that that shadow man was just passing through, and that he does not bother anyone living in that house ever again. And especially, don't come back to visit me. Number 8. Haunted House. Submitted by Kawaii X Ninja 95. At the time of this story, I was living in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm now in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. Back then I was in 6th grade when the story was taking place. So this happened one day as I was going to bed and I couldn't really sleep, so I started staring outside. Then I looked at the closet door and I saw a shadow reflected on it. But it was night and no lights were on and the windows and curtains were closed, so I had no idea how any shadow could have been reflected at all. I'm lying down now staring at the shadow reflecting on the closet door, and it starts moving with the breeze in the room. It was like a little girl playing soccer. Soon I turned away and I looked back, and the little girl was looking directly at me. I tried to ignore it, I tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't. The bedroom door was wide open, and I stared down the hallway and heard footsteps of running around the apartment and giggling, but everyone was asleep, and who would be laughing in the middle of the house at night? I looked up to see what seemed to be a silhouette going into my mother's room, and after that I turned to face the wall, and I swear at that moment I heard someone say, "Get out or die." After we moved out, I have not been to those apartments. In June of 2012, my family and I left Las Vegas, and we moved to Taylorsville, Utah. I was 16 and soon we got a new place, but the haunting continued. The house was a 4-bedroom place with 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 downstairs. I chose the room closest to the bathroom upstairs, which was also nearest to the backyard. One night, I was up all night on the phone talking to my friend, now boyfriend, until 8 a.m. in the morning. It got really cold in the room, but both windows were closed. I proceeded to pull the covers over me, as it felt like an iceberg had drifted into my bedroom. And then it felt like something was touching me. There was no one there, and each time I switched sides I was still being touched. It felt like a hand caressing under my neck, and I was completely motionless and quiet for a good minute. Then I heard my name called from downstairs. It sounded very faint, but I heard it. "Andrea!" Then I walked downstairs. I heard what sounded like laughing, but again everyone was asleep. After that day, I started to have these dreams about a little girl who had been killed in the lake that was behind our house. The first time I dreamt it, I woke up with what looked like marks that someone had been choking me. I couldn't make any sense of all of it, and still, to this day, I think about it. It's hard to explain, but it gives me chills. Number 9. The Creepy Mask. Submitted by Bob STOCH. At the time of this story, my family lived on a 400-acre farm, and we saw many ghosts there, but most were friendly, and as long as we didn't mess with them, they didn't mess with us. Sometimes they even helped. For example, if we were looking for something and we just looked on a table and it wasn't there, if we'd look again a minute later, it was there somehow. While this story isn't as scary as most of the other stories I've heard on these channels, when I was younger, it scared the absolute hell out of me. Of course, I don't remember a lot when I was 3. I do remember one horrifying day though. It all started when I was sleeping in my mom and dad's room in my crib, and I suddenly woke up hearing a voice. I don't remember how I felt about it because I was so young, but after a minute, I looked to my left towards the wall, and out of it a skeleton-type face appeared, and it laughed quietly. I started screaming, and I woke up my parents. As they were waking up, the face faded away with a smile on it. From the few words I could speak at the time, my parents knew I wanted to sleep with them, so they let me. The next day, I was at the kitchen table, and my brother runs in the room with the mask, which was the same exact face I saw on the wall the night before. Of course, I started screaming. That is all I remember from that age, and later I learned that my brother randomly found that mask outside the day after my first experience. It wasn't until I was about 9 when I remember seeing that mask again, on my bed, lying against the wall, looking at me. At this point, my brother was moved out, so he couldn't have been trying to scare me, and I was scared out of my mind of my room, so I asked to sleep with my parents again, and they let me. It wasn't until a few nights later that I started to sleep in my own room again, and it just so happened I woke up in the middle of the night with that mask floating right above me. We were making eye contact. As soon as I saw it, I screamed again, and it fell onto me. And right after that, my dad ran into my room. After that experience, only a few times more did I see it, but it would only be laying on the counter or in the living room. Since then, my parents have split up, and my mom did something to me and my dad, so now I don't really want to see her for a while. I'm living with my dad in his new place, and I haven't seen that mask since, and I'm still not quite sure what the thing using the mask was, and I don't really want to know. And finally, number 10, Reaper, submitted by AMJERKSON. My name is Tyler, and I'm from Saginaw, Michigan. As a kid, I grew up suffering from croup. It's a terrible illness that literally leaves you breathless. When I was 2, I had to be rushed into the hospital from it. And again when I was 7. I remember this event fairly greatly. I was staying at my grandparents' house as per usual. My mother was working all night and going to school to become a nurse during the day. So my grandparents, my sister, and I would stay with them most of the time. It's a beautiful place in Shields. Half of it was rebuilt by my grandfather himself. My mother and uncle have their own stories of this house being haunted, which may explain my experience here. I was around 7, my mother says. The day was an average fall day. My sister and I spent our day playing in a pile of leaves my grandfather made for us. After playing, we went inside, had our supper, and we went to bed shortly after. I don't remember too much else during that day. Now, you should know, we did share a bedroom there. We had 2 separate beds. I remember someone staying with my grandparents all night. I assumed it was a friend of my grandma's. Well, when we went to bed, I bunked with my sister so that my grandma's friend could have her own bed. We closed our eyes and drifted off to sleep without much of a wait. Then I woke up. There was a deafening ringing sound all around me. Everything seemed to be gray. The ringing drowned out any sound and even drowned itself out, if that makes any sense. Things were silent, yet loud. I don't know how else to say it. But what was really freaking me out was the face in front of my own. It was an old, gray woman. She didn't look anything other than neutral, just a blank face. I was staring at her, struggling to breathe. My grandparents rushed in, and the woman seemed to fade. She was still there, just clouded. The next thing I remember is waking up. Everything was white. It wasn't the brightest light I've ever seen so much as everything was just light. A figure was there, coming close it seemed, almost gliding. In an instant, it was right in front of me. And it was the same woman. She said I was not ready, and it's not for me yet. Then I woke up in the hospital with my mother right next to me. She was crying. I told her that they said it's not my time. And the rest after that is very fuzzy. I don't know who or what that woman was, but I think she was a reaper or something. For who, I don't know, because this time it wasn't me. I recently recalled this experience because I moved back into this old house after all these years. I'm now 22 and I have a 2-year-old daughter of my own. Recently, she had to go to the hospital because of her own attacks with the croup, and I hope that that reaper woman never has to visit her like she came to me. Being lucky enough to have never stepped in a haunted house, I can only imagine what it might be like to live in one. To be lying in bed, trying to sleep, when footsteps come closer from the hallway, when your bedroom door opens, when something or someone lies down next to you. I mean, what could be worse than that? Especially when you live alone. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget, send me any of your true stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. And currently, we are looking for Christmas stories to read. So, thanks.